Now we are live.
Live on Facebook.
We're live on Facebook. Oh my gosh. It's just like live at Rockefeller Center. All right, you guys. So this is a little surprise. So whoever's there, whoever's visiting, Nicole and I had not a great session when we did our last one together. We tried Facebook Live and it was kind of was not good. There was so much feedback that I wasn't able to speak. And if you know anything about me, that was very difficult. So especially with my good friend, Nicole Blades on the other end.
That was a test that was just not good.
No.
Yeah.
It's so hard for, I was like signaling and holding up notes. So anyway, I think this is going to be terrific, and I hope someone's there to watch it. And we will keep it on Facebook so that people can watch it. But so I had Sadiqa on last night, and she talked about the Yellow Wife.
Yes.
Which was really fun to talk about. And then I realized that we just really needed to hear more from you about the book that came out last.
Yeah.
About Nora.
Yeah. Have you met Nora?
Have you met Nora? Mm-hmm. And then, but I can't remember. I don't think we talked. You don't talk about your next one.
No, I kind of gave a vague description of what I'm working on. And in fact, I'm so superstitious. So my agent is, she's going out with this new book right after Labor Day. So next week.
Oh.
So I am nervous, excited, whatever that, nerve-sighted. And I'm nerve-sighted. And I am just like, because you well know, I mean, a lot of people who are avid readers, but not necessarily writers, don't know how long the process is and how long you're living with a book before it actually hits the shelves. I mean, so this particular book I started writing after my former agent, that's another story, but my former agent was unable to sell the book that I wrote after Have You Met Nora came out. Oh. And so it was very devastating. And I was like, and it sort of spurred me. I did what I do, and that is just start working on something else. That's how I kind of deal with it, is just launch myself into another creative thing. Mm-hmm. And so I had the pity party of like, why don't they like this book? But I moved on and I started writing this new book. And
can I just stop you?
Yeah.
Readers, can you imagine writing an entire book and then never letting it see the light of day? No readers are going to get to read it. Even the people that are your biggest fans and they want to read it, you have to take your big book, put it in a drawer, and forget about it, sort of, because you never.
Although I will say that I was not ready to put this in a drawer, so I kind of put it on a side shelf, not even a back burner. I put it on the side shelf to revisit, and I've had some ideas on how to kind of recast it and bring it back to life later.
Yeah.
But so this book that we're going out with now on submission, it took a little while to write it, and then I changed agents in between. So that was its own process. Yeah. But my new agent is fantastic. And so she read it through, loved it. And then, but I had to do some revision. So the revision took some more time, And then when you look up, you're like, oh, I've been living with this book for a year and a half or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And then it takes time for all the pieces to come together. So we are now getting ready to go out on submission. And then that's a whole other waiting game too. Yes. But I'm very excited about this book, and so is my agent. And I'm just looking forward to when I will be able to, shout it out to the world, the good news about when this book will come out.
Okay, but are you allowed to say the title or no?
No.
Okay. So is your agent my agent?
Who's your agent?
Rachel Ekstrom.
Yes. Oh my gosh, yes, that's true. Isn't that crazy?
That's like it's like finding out your sister.
She is so great. And what's interesting to readers is the whole process of finding an agent and making sure that that relationship is the right kind of dynamic is its own process too. And when you realize that maybe that relationship isn't working the way it should, or maybe it's one of those, it's not you, it's me situations, or whatever it is, and you do have to part ways, it's difficult because you're so like, as artists, you're so just nervous about people saying, yes, I pick you, I'm picking you.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
And I've gone through a few agents, one because one left the industry and she runs Grub Street now in Boston.
Oh, wow. I'm part of Grub Street. Yes, that's great.
Yeah. Eve Rydberg.
Yes.
She was my first agent.
Great.
And then I was sort of gifted to somebody in the in her house. And then I moved on to another agent and I left her, and it was such a heartbreaking process. You know, it's so hard to do.
It's a breakup. It's a breakup.
Yeah, it's a really hard breakup. But I have Rachel now too. And you guys that are watching this, some of you know for sure, but other people may not know that your agent is the person, the gateway to a publisher. Like if you have the wrong agent, or they don't get you, or they ask you for revisions that don't really fit you as a writer or something, it can be really difficult. So trying to find an agent is like trying to find a boyfriend or a husband. Like it's a close relationship.
It's a close relationship. I mean, they're your advocate, and sometimes they're the bad cop to your good cop in some situations. And they are able to navigate the sort of the avenues that you're not necessarily privy to. And that's fine. I mean, you do the work, you do the writing, and they do the, the sort of promoting it and selling you. And sometimes some agents need to even like be your hype man. And when you're feeling like, oh my gosh,
for sure.
Yeah, like when it's not working and you're feeling down in the dumps, you're having a crisis of confidence, they are the ones that are, not just giving you lip service or blowing smoke, but telling you honestly, like, this is what's working, this is what's not, we got this, stick to it, don't procrastinate, get back to work. I liked what you said here. And they're really helping to kind of like just smooth the feathers.
Rachel is so good with me on that. Like she's so kind and lovely, and she is a hype man. Like she's so sweet. She's great. She's also very smart, and she also, whenever I don't want to have the hard conversation with like my editor or whatever, she does it all, which is really good because I'm really bad with conflict.
It's true. You need that person who has the information, has the connections, has the resources, and has the voice to speak for you and be able to represent your needs and what you're looking for.
I always think it's really interesting that, so, after you've been in the book world for a while, you sort of know how the process goes, but I'm always surprised that, like, I'll tell somebody, oh, I sold a book, and they'll be like, so what does that mean again? People that are really close to you that should know, right? Because it's not an intuitive process. It's a very different kind of process. And I think that I'm fascinated by it. And I think most readers are fascinated by it. Yeah. So
I think readers don't realize how many people are involved with pushing that book like a bus up the hill, and how much time it takes. And you're right. There are a lot of people. I had a close family member a couple of years ago sort of say like, oh, when I had thought about, parting ways with my agent for a long time. And it was, you and I had conversations about it. It was a long sort of, what do I do, hand-wringing thing. And then when I spoke to this person, they were like, oh, so that's how it works. So the agent is who connects you with the public. Like they didn't, like as supportive as they were, they just didn't even recognize the pieces and the parts to the whole process. So you're right. I think a lot of people don't really know how a book gets made. And then also a lot of people will say things like, you're like, oh, my book's coming out, oh, we got a book deal. It's coming out in 2 years.
Right? Yeah, they're like, what? What? And then you talk about the new book or something, and they're like, wait, so is this the one? I'm like, no, that one's done. Like that one's a done deal.
But it's not out yet. Yeah.
Yeah, and they are like, well, when is that one coming out? And I'm like, I get your frustration because it's the longest baby delivery ever.
It is. It really is.
So long. Oh, I know. What I was going to say is, so before I really was started writing even, I remember thinking, this is how a book happens. Anita Shreve sits down at the beach and Anita writes a book and it's fantastic. And she does it all the way through and she's got a scarf on and glasses. And she's got the most beautiful beach house. And
of course,
then it comes out perfectly done. And that's it. And then I get to buy a beach house.
Yes.
This is how it really was. Oh my God, I want to die until the book comes out. And then again, you want to die. Like
I think that's how writers to this day, some have this sort of like, I don't know, it's not even lizard brain. It's this idea of how we have these expectations and these preconceived ideas about how, the whole agent, publisher, editor thing works. Because back in the day, you'd hear about these long relationships, so-and-so was with this publisher for 20 years and all of this, or, they had the same editor, this editor picked them out of the slush pile and they had the same editor for the last 22 years. And like, it's not like that anymore, but you sort of still have that kind of romantic idea about how the agent and editor writer relationship works and how the whole process works. Like you sit down and you have some angst a little bit and then you write and maybe you have bourbon or whatever on the rocks or neat or whatever. And then you put out this masterpiece. And I think we kind of all have that little dream in our heads, even though we know in our logical brain, that's not how it works. You still kind of feel this way emotionally.
Yeah. Well, I read Margaret Atwood's Testament.
Yes.
And the second one, Testaments, the second one after The Handmaid's Tale. And I can't believe, she's such a master at craft. And I thought to myself, I wonder if this just took her like no time. Like she just zoom. And then I thought, because she's so good at it, and she's got those master classes and it must just fall out of her. She's got all those books. Well, then I'm a big acknowledgement reader.
Yes. Yeah, me too.
I love reading those.
I read them first. Yeah.
Oh, do you?
I always read them first.
Oh, I think I read them wherever they are in the book because sometimes they add. But anyway, she said, thank you so much for it. And she listed a bunch of people. She goes, for telling me what it never is going to fly, what is going to fly, what works, what should be cut, and all this stuff. And I thought, wow, if Margaret Atwood needs all that, then I can feel less bad about me.
I know. Well, Margaret Atwood is Canadian, so I'm always like, yes.
Yeah. Right, I keep
but
Canadian.
The other day I was, so Zadie Smith, who is another, big name in publishing, there was all this hubbub about the fact that she wrote that new book. They're calling it a slim book because it's like, I don't know, barely 200 pages, maybe 100 and something pages. It's like an extended essay.
Yeah.
So she wrote this new book, but she wrote it during quarantine, like during the lockdown, the early stages of quarantine.
Okay.
Of lockdown. And so that was sort of the publishing push of it, like, basically. So everybody was like, of course Zadie Smith wrote a book when we were all just trying to figure out, where we're going to get bread flour and yeast and things like that. But so I was kind of like, oh, grumble. But then I listened to this podcast called Call Your Girlfriend, and they spoke to Zadie Smith about the book. And I'm so glad I did because it gave me more context to how she wrote the book. She wrote the book because she was feeling like most of us, just like stunned and falling apart. And for her, writing is the one thing she can do. She was like, I don't have the tolerance to go out and, give blood or do other things, but writing I can do. And it was the one thing that kind of saved me from just completely unraveling. So I was like, this is making more sense. That's how she was able to write this book during this very unprecedented time, is because it was the only thing she could do to kind of stay afloat.
Yeah.
And so I forgave her for writing this book, and I got the book. So I've been reading it. That's the other problem. I'm reading too many books at once.
Oh, me too.
It's a
Yeah.
bad habit, but
I
I'm
do.
kind of doing it because in the early stages of lockdown, I was unable to concentrate and read properly. Like I just was not, like a lot of people have been complaining about this. Like my brain was so overloaded with news and Twitter and this and that I just couldn't focus on reading, which is like the thing I love to do.
Mhm.
So finally, my dry spell broke when I read Britt Bennett's book, The Vanishing Half.
Second
And
time
so
I read
since
that
then,
today.
it's so good. It's
I'm
so,
gonna,
so
I
good.
know, I gotta go to my independent bookstore and buy it.
It's so good. And so after that, I was like, okay, we're back. And so I've been reading. But the thing is, there's so much that like my nightstand, I call it Mount Nightstand because it's like a little mountain.
Yeah.
And I was
Nice.
just like reading so many things, but like, 2 pages out of this, 3 pages out of that. So it's not the best way to read, I will admit, but it's kind of like what I'm trying to do to catch up on all that I missed in those first few months.
I'm doing the same thing. I'm always got a whole bunch of things kind of, because sometimes they don't grab me right away, but then later on they do grab me, and then I'm really happy that I read them.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
So give us a list. What have you been reading?
Okay, so I read The Vanishing Half, and I was telling everybody, it was like I was being paid to promote this book. I was telling everyone to read this book. And then I read Natasha Trethewey's memoir called Memorial Drive.
Oh yeah.
And that was so good. I mean,
Really?
really good. She's a poet, and so her poetry was all through there, but it's heartbreaking and but beautiful at the same time. And I read that, and that was fantastic. And after that, I started reading Cast by Isabel Wilkerson, and her books are always like phone books. So you're taking your time sort of digesting that.
Yeah.
And then I read, because I started reading Malcolm Gladwell's book, Talking to Strangers.
Yeah.
But it was the wrong time to read this book because it starts off talking about Sandra Bland, her horrific story. And then like it gets into a whole bunch of stuff like they're talking about Jerry Sandusky and that whole thing. Yeah. So it's like a lot of stuff where I was just like, oh, no, I don't want, I just cleared myself from, not being able to concentrate. I don't want this. So a friend of mine, Liza, told me, she's like, stop reading that book, put it away, and read something light and fun and just sweet and devour it. So I started reading this book called, I think it's called Rafe, R-A-F-E. It's The Male Nanny.
Oh, is it good?
It's so good. It's by Rebecca Wilkerson, I think her last name. No, not Wilkerson. Weatherspoon, I think. It is sex, but good sex scenes. And so it's this woman, she's divorced, and she has twin daughters.
I'm writing.
And her nanny quits on her without any notice. And she ends up hiring this male nanny who is tattooed and hunky and hulky. But it is so you're just I was reading it in the middle of the night, oh, I can't put it down. But it's so good. It's just really good, fun. And good. I'm so glad I read that instead of Talk to Strangers. It's what I needed. It's steamy and good, good romance, but sort of erotica-ish, but really good, really, really good.
Oh my God, those are good books.
It was really good.
I know. I went through a period where I was reading a ton, and then I backed off a little bit. I think I was waiting for my edits or something. And so I had a whole bunch of time to write, and I didn't have much energy to do anything. So I read Dear Edward, which I loved.
Yes.
And then I read Normal People, and then I watched.
Oh, I read that one too. Yeah.
So good and sexy. But and also sad and depressing. But then you watch the show, and it's so porny that. And I watched it with my daughter, and I was like, "Oh my!" It was it's so good.
The thing with that story is, and it was really, really clear in the book. It was clear, but also when you saw the actual Hulu series, I was like, "Oh my gosh!" So much of their angst and yearning and pain could have been dealt with if they just communicated to each other and
they
just
would have
said,
said, "I love you." Period. Like,
Or I do want you to move in with me.
Yeah.
Yes. Instead of like
what's going on? Do you want to come over or not? Like,
it was so much like torment where you're like, why don't you guys just talk to each other? You know, just say something about how you're feeling.
Yeah, like, good God, what if I get rejected? Okay, I know, but oh, sad. And then I read Euphoria, Lily King's Euphoria, and then I also read Lily King's Writers and Lovers.
Oh, okay.
They're both
Was that good?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then I Nothing to See Here, which is the one about the woman who's the nanny for her friends, and the kids spontaneously combust every time.
Oh, I read that before all of this.
Yeah,
I read that before all of this. Yes, so that was fun. Yeah,
that's a good book. So
that was a good book.
Yeah, so I have read a ton lately, and you know, I also listen to books on tape. So there's kind of a mix of things that I do, and it has been a really great time to do that in my mind. I know a lot of people haven't been able to read, but in my mind, I have been able to.
I started reading middle grade books too, because I have an interest in that genre, a personal interest. And what's funny is that my son, who's 11, he has, for as long as he can communicate this to me, he has said, he's a big reader as well. Anytime he sees me working on my laptop and I'm working on my book, he's like, Mom, when are you going to write a book that I can read? When are you going to write a book that I can read? So I've been thinking about it. So I started reading some middle grade, and middle grade is really interesting right now. Like, I mean, I know there's a lot of stuff about YA and people are always talking about it, but middle grade isn't what it used to be. You know what I mean? Like, they're tackling some interesting stuff. Yeah. And some of it is hardier and weightier than I thought middle grade is, but it's really well done. Like, the things that I've been reading have been really well done. I'm impressed with the stuff that's coming out right now, you know, in the middle grade stuff. So I've been reading a bunch of those. And I also started reading the other book that I was going to reread. I started rereading Homegoing by Ya Jassy, but it's one of those things where you're like, should I read a new book or reread this other book that I like so much? You know, like, how should I spend my time? What should I do?
Oh my God, I never reread. Except,
that's
not fair. That's so not true. That's completely, I lied right 100% to your face. I do reread. Like, shut up, Ann. I have read Olive Kitteridge so many times. And you know what book I forgot to mention that I read is Samantha Irby's No Thank You. Or
yes. Wow. No thank you. Yeah.
That book, I was reading it and I never giggle out loud. Giggling out loud over and over and over.
Yeah. She's funny. She is funny.
She is so funny and courageous.
I know.
Everybody should read that. If you need a giggle, every woman our age. Right? I just shift your age right up to mine, but I'm so we have a couple of questions here. Like one of them is, how did you decide to move to a different agent? Because these questions came in a little bit later, but I just saw them now.
Yeah. Why did I decide, or how did I do it?
No, it says, how did you decide to move to a different agent?
Well, and I have nothing but good things to say about my former agent. So, but I was feeling like, it started to feel like not a good fit. You know, if you're in a relationship, even a friendship, where you're like, I don't know if this is working. Like, I don't feel the way I used to, or the way I should about this relationship. And I should preface that by saying that my former agent and we didn't have like our meet cute moment. She kind of inherited me. So it was like an arranged marriage.
Yes.
And so the woman that I originally signed with, she left agenting in the middle of my 2-book deal. So I got passed over to my former agent. So it was one of those things where I was like slightly panicked, but then it's like, oh, well, she's good enough. She's nice enough that this is going to work. But I was also still in that haze of like, I've got an agent, you know, as a writer, that's what you're like, okay, I just want to get an agent. And when you get one, you're not trying to look that gift horse in the mouth kind of thing.
It is a very hard thing.
It is a very hard thing, but I sort of like shushed that part of myself that was saying, I don't know about this. Because I was like, be grateful they brought you to the dance. Don't stop, start looking around for somebody else to dance with. Just be glad that you're at the dance. So I started to feel this like, oh, I don't know. But I pushed it down because I was afraid. I didn't have the confidence to say like, this isn't working for me. I'm going to look for somebody else. And then,
I think
so it was annoying me for a long time. And I would sort of like talk about it a bit at a time with, trusted friends.
Yeah.
But then after she was unable to sell that other book, that's when I was like, I don't want to continue pouring my heart into a project, taking a year to write something, handing it over to someone who is maybe not the right person to sell this book. She maybe is not the right fit for me.
Hype girl.
So I don't want to keep doing this because you get one shot. You can't be like, okay, I wrote this book. Oh, you didn't sell it. Okay, here's another one. Oh, you didn't sell that one. Here. No one has time for that. Not in these times. No.
Yeah.
So that was the big push that I needed, that she was unable to sell that other book. And I felt like, okay, it's now or I'm going to just be in this sort of like this hole forever. And I talked to Ann about it. I talked to a couple other writer friends about, what do I do here? And heard about their stories about, agents that didn't work out. And I talked to the Tall Poppies. I asked things like, I did some research, like what are you looking for in an agent, or what made you stay with the agent you have, or what is the best thing about your agent? And some of the poppies were like, she talks me down from the ledge. Some of them were like, he gets me the big money, the big deals. And that's what I'm looking for, a shark who's going to get me the good deals. He doesn't have to talk to me every day. He doesn't have to, sort of like hold my hand. I just need someone who knows the business end of it, like a shark. And that's what they were looking for. So that made me start questioning, writing it down on paper. What do I want? What do I need? What's going to make me feel represented? And that's how I started to come to that decision where I was like, I don't feel like she's checking these boxes off for me. So I do need to make a move, and I need to just do it. So it took me like 3 months to kind of like summons the nerve to say, okay, I don't want to do this. And I just finished writing that most recent draft of the book that we're going out with now. And I was like, I don't feel confident handing this over to her as her next chance. I was like, no, I'm going to go find someone who has the fresh energy that I need. And basically the new, sort of like a new set of eyes to sort of look ahead and help me get where I want to go with my career. So it was a tough call, and it took me a lot of consternation involved, but I decided at the top of the year, whenever we came back from New Year's Day, like January 3rd or whatever, I was like, here's the email, let's have a conversation. And I sort of like, had to talk myself into getting ready for that conversation, to do the superhero stance or whatever it is that you need to do to like get the nerve. And I had the conversation with her, and she was so gracious, so good about it. It went the best way it could have ever gone. And I felt good about it after. I felt like my side of the street was clean, no bridges were burned. And she was so gracious about it that I was like, okay, good. I can always go back there if anything should ever come up where I need something from her. I knew that I can go back to her, and we ended on really good terms. So that made me feel good about it. But it took a long time to get there.
I went to a hairdresser for years that didn't do a great job because I couldn't, so an agent just seems like, because you work so hard to get them,
Yeah.
It's a very difficult thing. So I have another question here, and she says, Karen Mills Cosgard says, when does the editor come into play? Like, when does that happen?
So you get your agent sends your book out on submission to different editors at different houses. All the different imprints in the different houses that make sense for your book. So you get a plan together on where you're going to go out on submission. So they send this out. with your whole package and sort of selling you and this book to these editors.
Mm-hmm.
So then if an editor at Random House or at, I don't know, any of these publishing houses or an imprint says, I want to buy this book, that's when the editor comes into play, because then they're going to be on that project working on it with you. So they're going to be editing it and then coming back with notes and sending you the editor's letter about like, here's what I think you should change or not. And that relationship is also important because, you know, you want to be able to feel comfortable saying, I don't necessarily agree with that change. And you want to feel like that person's going to listen to you and, or show you why you should maybe consider that making that change and not sort of like just steamroll over you and insist on things. You know, you want to have a good rapport with that editor as well. That's another.
Yeah, the interesting thing is the editor might love your book and they might bring it to the marketing team and the marketing team says no.
Yes.
So the marketing team says, oh, it's not a good time for that book, or maybe that book doesn't hit the right notes right now, or you know, we like the idea, but we have another one that's sort of similar to that.
That's the dice, you know, but the thing is, you also want to have an editor who has the sway and has the clout at the house, who can say, I really believe in this, and get the team to push behind it, because there's always that one book that the whole team is like, this is it. We're rallying behind this book, marketing, everybody's on board, and this is what we're doing.
Right.
So you want to have that editor who is senior enough and has enough clout and respect, and their voice carries loud enough that if they are really believing in this book, they can kind of, you know, get other people on board and push that bus up the hill. For sure. Yeah,
you know, I think that it's interesting because I think that everyone knows how hard it is. It must be so hard to have a movie made.
Yeah.
No, and that, but the book world is still it's very quiet. Like, I don't think people really understand how hard it is necessarily like, I assume that it must be a mammoth undertaking to even get a movie greenlighted.
Oh yeah. And then after that, there's so much like,
so much.
How many, think about like movies that have been optioned, or books that have been optioned to become movies, or, you know, it gets greenlit and then it just never gets made.
I think Ursula Le Guin waited 30 years for her book finally to come out in film. They optioned it 30 years before. She almost died.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and then it finally did come out. And then I'm not sure she's living now, but
No.
Yeah.
But then also with movies, same thing with books, you know, it could be the book that everybody, or the movie that everyone's pushing for, and the studios and the big money and everything's behind it. And then the audiences just don't go. They don't take to it. It doesn't get good reviews. Same thing with a book. It could be the book that the whole house is behind, and for whatever reasons, it just doesn't go there. People are just sort of not into it for whatever reasons. It might not be the season for the book or whatever. And then what? You know what I mean? You have this sort of critical success, but the commercial success isn't there. Right. And that happens with both movies and books, where
absolutely,
it's just how it is. You never know.
Right? So Don Miller says, how many editors should an agent approach before saying a book isn't selling? Or at what point do you consider ebooks or, you know, print on demand? So self-publishing, she's saying.
Yeah, I think that's always a choice. Like if for whatever reasons your agent was unable to sell the book and they went wide, meaning they went to nearly all the houses, and they didn't get anything, no bites. And you'll hear stories of that, like big time books who've been like, oh yeah, this was rejected 32 times or whatever. So sometimes it takes a lot of rejections before you find that one, you know, right fit, make that love connection. But if for whatever reasons that book doesn't sell, you could say, you know what, this book needs to be out there. I believe in this book, it needs to be out there, and I'm going to do a self-publishing of it. Oh my gosh, here comes my dog. How dare you? He just pushed the door open like he pays rent or something here. He was like, anyway.
That's so funny.
Murphy. he's not interested.
I had to put Peanut in his purse, but I'll pull him out now.
In his purse. Come here, buddy. His best friend is my son, so he's not interested in me. Here he is. Here's Murphy.
See Murphy. Oh, Murphy's beautiful. Peanut's, look,
There's
we got
another
all
dog.
the dogs.
Look at Peanut. Murphy gets shy with cameras. Whenever I'm taking a picture of him, he pretends like he can't see it and he's looking away.
Yeah, I know. Peanut does it too. Oh, Peanut's leaving. Okay.
You're gonna go, Bum Bum? So back to the question. So you can decide, I'm gonna do self-publishing, but that is not like an easy thing either.
Oh my God.
There's so many parts involved, and
crazy.
it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work for you. You've got to make sure you get like an editor to look at it, a copy editor to look through it, and making sure that it becomes as polished and as well presented as you can. The book cover, all of it. There's so many pieces to self-publishing or even, print on demand. So it's a decision if you want to take on all of that. And I didn't. I wanted to go the traditional publishing route. And I still believe in that book, so much so that I'm like, I have an idea that came to me over the weekend of how to redo the book. And I'm excited about it. So I'm going to talk to Rachel about it as well.
I have 2 books like that. 2 books that I wrote. That's why I haven't had a book out since 2016. I wrote 2 books in the drawers.
Right.
So
I think every writer has a book or 2 in the drawer. And some of those books are like, these books will never see the light of day because they're horrible or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But then you have some others that you kind of are like, I still love that book, and I still at some point will bring it back out and dust it off and see what.
Oh my God, I love these 2 books. So I hope that someday I get to do something with them. But but it was a heartbreak. It's just the way it is. Just the way it is.
I know.
Okay, let's see. What else should we talk about? You guys, people should ask us questions because we are willing to answer pretty much anything.
You know what? I was reading something on Wired magazine, and it was this article. This dog is in and out, in and out.
I was reading action is.
Just the other day, have you ever had this feeling where it's almost like the universe or whatever is like, are we having an issue with X? Here's an article. And you're like, I was just thinking about this. Or
I feel like that all the time. Yeah.
So at the start of the week, I was feeling like, just anxious about all of the uncertainty that we are in right now. My son's school starts next week. So there's uncertainty about that. And just, we don't know anything about what's going to happen next as we're moving into fall. Mm-hmm. And there just feels like there's a lot of question marks and, with a vaccine, all of it.
Yeah.
So I've been feeling like just anxious. The uncertainty was weighing on me. Mm-hmm. So I go on Twitter and there is an article from Wired magazine. I think it was just yesterday. Excuse me. Hang on a second. Murphy, you got to get out of here, honey. Sorry. You can't do that on CNN, right? So,
no.
Wired magazine, they had this thing and it was called How to Deal with the Anxiety Around Uncertainty. And I was like, Wired, are you talking to me? Has my FBI agent been talking to you? The one that's in my phone? So it was talking about everything that I was feeling. And they even mentioned how many people have been saying that they're having trouble concentrating and reading. People who are avid readers are having problems reading. So they gave you some sort of like actionable things that you can do to help sort of deal with, balance out the anxiety. And one of them was, 2 things that stuck out for me was binge. Like they said, it's no surprise that people were turning to comfort food, because they need something that feels familiar, that they can really seek comfort in. So a lot of people were, getting the pizza rolls or the peanut butter and jelly sandwiches.
So much quiche, the amount of quiche that I ate.
Exactly. The baking of the bread, all that stuff.
Yeah.
But they said also a lot of people started turning to shows, TV shows that they used to watch as children or when they were younger. And that was also comforting. So there were a lot of like binging, you know, old episodes of The Office or Friends or whatever it is that you were really, and it was like easy to sort of just kind of lull you back into a sense of, I know what's going to happen here. I know what to expect. So it kind of gives you that sense of power and certainty. They also said that's the reason why people were buying toilet paper like it was going out of style, because it was giving you some sort of sense of control over something, you know?
Yeah.
But so I was like, yeah, that's why I've been watching, like I was binging shows that I've seen, you know, years ago. But they said another thing that is good is to find an activity that's not so hard that you'll sort of be like, oh, forget it, I'm not going to be able to complete this, but also not too easy that you'll be bored. So I was like, that makes a lot of sense, you know, like finding some sort of new hobby that you can do. And I know I like to bake, and we talked about this last time. I like baking because it is so precise and it is so different from writing and anything creative, in that sense that it's the science of it, where, you know, a half a pound of this, a quarter cup of that. And if you follow the directions, you will more than likely get exactly what you're supposed to get.
Yeah.
So I like that. And that sort of certainty, it was appealing to me. And I found that I was baking more during especially during the middle stages of the pandemic. And I was like, you know what? There's a lot of sense to that. Like, I feel like you turn to the things where you feel like you have control over them, and you turn to the things where you're like, oh, this is very familiar. I feel safe in this.
Well, and I can attest to that because I watched her from afar on her Instagram. I'm like, cake, more cake. Like, she was driving me crazy. I'm like, I'm eating my quiche going, more cake. And
The quiche.
it was like, what the heck? It looked so good. Everything was so yummy looking.
It's so tasty, and I just like it. I mean, I don't even need, in the beginning, I tried to convince my son to help me make things, but I was like, get out of here. He's not helping me. You know, I just needed to sort of like challenge myself and like, I've never tried this before. I'm going to try to make this. I made croissants the other day because I was like, I've never tried croissants. And as you well know, I probably won't do them again. They turned out great, but it's just too much work where you're like, I'll just buy them. It's fine.
So Amy, I don't want to interrupt you because nothing better than talking about cake, but Amy said you should talk again about the article that you wrote, because I think it was just too mushy yesterday when we were trying to talk about it.
Runner's World.
Story.
Yeah. So I wrote an article, my first cover story for Runner's World, my first article assignment for Runner's World in general. And I was so excited about it. I'm very proud about it because it was an interview with Olympian and track star Alicia Montano. And so she is very, she's one of these women where you're just impressed with her immediately. She is funny, personable, smart, sharp, and she's an activist, and very much one of those people who's like, I'm speaking up, I have a voice, I have a platform, I'm using it. And so she, last May, 2019, Mother's Day, she had this big New York Times op-ed. It was a video op-ed where she broke her NDA. Two of her sponsors were Nike and ASICS, huge sponsors. And she broke her NDA with them to talk about how shoddy their maternity practices were. So they had basically, it was one of those situations where you got pregnant, you were considered on the injured list. And so they stopped paying you. It was considered an injury. And they stopped paying you.
It feels so hostile.
It was horrible. So her whole thing was, Nike told me to just do it or dream for the start, make my dreams come true until I said I wanted to be a mother. And that's when everything changed. So she basically put them on blast, and it was this huge thing. And the ripple effect was a lot of women in other industries came out saying, me too, that has happened to me. I was working at I was a pilot. I was working in this industry. And the minute I had children, I had a baby, all of a sudden I was sidetracked or sidelined or put on the bench. And other athletes, other like major names came out sort of saying like, it's about time someone's talked about this. And it forced Nike and Asics. I think Asics sort of like hid under Nike's skirt a little bit, but Nike had to come out and change and update some of their maternity protections. And she became an advocate for working mothers. And it doesn't matter if you're working on a track or at an, you're representing the America at the Olympics, or you're working as a teacher. You need to be protected, and your job needs to have certain things in place to make you feel like, okay, I am valued here, and they're not going to just put me out of pasture because I had a baby. So I interviewed her about that. I interviewed her about.
Wait, there was something else that, I'm sorry, I just wanted to mention this thing that you said there were no Black athletes on the cover, no female.
Okay,
Black.
so Runner's World has been around forever.
Forever.
And Alicia, I mean, it's like the mountaintop when you're talking about like outdoor and running and all of that. So, I mean, it's a major title. And Alicia herself had mentioned she has a podcast, and she was talking to these two other women athletes. There it is. Yay.
There it is.
She was talking to she has a podcast with two other co-hosts, and they were talking about racism in racing and racism in sports in general. And so they ended up talking about the fact that something like Runner's World was doing so poorly on representation. They had no, like, I think they did a survey. Someone did a collage of like the last, 24 covers, which is 2 years of covered or 5 years of covers. And they had like maybe 3 brown or Black bodies featured on the cover of that magazine. And you're like, wait a minute. When you're looking at your readership, there are more than 2 or 3 Black and brown people reading your magazine. And even within the pages, there was just nothing that spoke to Black athletes, brown athletes. It was just a very white situation.
Mm-hmm.
So she called them out, and we talked about it in the interview, which was interesting because I was happy that they let me go there too. And it wasn't one of those like, let's not talk about that. She's got the cover now, let's not talk about that. It was very much a question of pointedly asking her if she felt like that was progress or performance, And so we talked about all of that. And it was a really wide-ranging conversation. And I was really so excited to talk to someone about these things that are real issues happening in the world right now that are affecting us and the impact of it all. And her using her influence to affect impact was important too. And she was so honest and forthcoming. So it was really a great moment. And what was also making it special, even more special, was the fact that, so it's this Black woman on the cover of this magazine that rarely has Black people on the cover. And then it was a Black writer writing the cover story. And then the photographer who did the cover shoot was a Black man. So it felt like, oh, this is an all Black everything situation. And that made it even more special. And it was kind of, I don't want to say historic, that feels weighty, but it was really a special issue in that sense, because Runner's World is really trying to put they're trying to walk the walk and not just talk the talk. And they're really trying in a big way. So I felt really proud to be involved with that project.
It seems absolutely outrageous, not to, I'm glad that they're doing that, but it does seem very outrageous that they haven't had a Black or brown runner, considering who are all the Black and brown runners that Usain Bolt, that he never was on the cover?
Exactly. I mean, it's one of those things where you're like, wow, it's one of those things where, like, there's been this reckoning happening in the last 3 months or so, where a lot of magazines and media companies have been forced to face the fact that they have not even considered Black, Indigenous, people of color at all in their coverage, in their content. It's just one of those things where blinders were on and it didn't affect them, so they weren't thinking about it. Mm-hmm. And so now there's been this huge sort of like, the drapes are open and everyone is now looking to these heads of these media companies to say, okay, what are you going to do about it? Mm-hmm. What are you going to do about it? And I think a lot of them have been stepping up, but it's, like, for example, was it Harper's? bazaar that had, like, I think it was like 110 years that they've never had. This is their first Black editor-in-chief or person of color that's an editor-in-chief in like their history. It's one of those things where you're like, whoa, when you hear, or even like the Aunt Jemima thing where they were like, oh, maybe this isn't the best thing to have on our box of pancakes after like 162 years. You're like, wait, what? No one thought about this before?
I know the butter package too with the
Land O'Lakes. Yes.
Yes. And, you know, I mean, I understand that it is part of people's memories and nostalgia, and there was a lot of things up in arm about that, but that's essentially what we're talking about. Like, you can't represent people in ways that are degrading, and
for years, decades,
and so narrow, you know, it's so unbelievably narrow. So yeah, for 100 years, right? So that is pretty landmark. I mean, I was really proud of you when I saw that.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's not a small thing. It's such a big thing, and really, I'm sure it was a big, you know, what am I thinking? What's the word I want to say? Just a jewel in your cap or a feather in your cap.
Yeah.
Because that's not a small. I've been reading that magazine for years.
I felt so good about it. I'm really proud about it.
Yeah. Here, I want to show, I know we can see your book up there, but I'm going through your Instagram because then
you're so kind. Thank you.
This is her book, which isn't that pretty? I love that cover. But just wait, because there's something else I want to show you.
I want to talk about covers when you're finished showing me this other thing.
Oh, the other.
So that's another thing that people don't really get too about covers.
Oh, I can talk about covers because I'm really going through it right now. Look at her cake. Like, are you kidding me? Not to reduce your skills to cake, but oh my God. Yeah, let's talk about covers.
You know, that's the other thing. Like, I think you didn't realize, like, before I became a published writer, I thought that it was part of that romantic idea of the writer's experience. And I thought that they could have all the say in what goes on the cover. And it was like, no, you're lucky if you have to get to a certain level before you have like sort of the right of refusal about a cover. You get the last say on a cover. And there's so many times where you'll see a cover of a book and, you know, the old adage, never judge a book by its cover, is true when it comes to people, but when it comes to books, you're judging that thing by what the cover looks like. If it's a crappy cover, you're like, I'm not picking this up. That doesn't look good to me. So it's interesting when people will be like, oh, why do you have this on the cover? It's like, well, it really wasn't my call. Or,
oh my God,
this would have been better if you had a cover like this. You're like, I
actually have one that we can talk about. So this is the dog ear, and you can see that there's a spotted dog down there. And my first review said, my gosh, there is a Dalmatian on the cover of that book, and there is no Dalmatian in that book. And then they went on for paragraphs to slay me over that. Yeah. And
which was not your call, by the way.
It's not my call. And plus, that could have been a Springer Spaniel, thank you, or any other kind of dog. Like, who knows?
Know your dogs.
Well, and I just thought, does it have to be that dog? Like, I never heard it. Then I was like, well, To Kill a Mockingbird, no Mockingbird. So there was a lot of, like, I was so shocked that people would take it so literally.
Yeah.
I was very surprised by that, but I do know full well that covers matter. I'm going through it right now with my editor. They've given me several ideas, and I can buy carpeting or paint my house faster than I can decide on a cover.
Right. Because it's so important. It's so important, you know,
yeah.
And you can't change it unless, you know, from hardcover to, you get a second shot and a second bite of the apple when you go to paperback. But even that, like, I was fortunate. My two books that came out with Kensington, Have You Met Nora? And then before that, The Thunder Beneath Us. I was fortunate in that they asked for my input with the covers. Yeah. So I sent them, like, I was like, say no more. And I sent them, you know, like mock-ups of, these are the covers that are giving me the look and feel that I'm going for with this. And I even sent a movie poster for this other movie. So they took that into account. And then with Have You Met Nora, they sent me the mock-up, and I was like, the font is kind of too curly, and I think the flowers should be this, and I think that the picture that she's holding should be this. And they took my suggestions. So I felt like victory,
really
you know,
great.
because that is rare. It could have been like, they could have said, okay, thanks for your suggestions, and still gone with whatever they wanted to. So I was very thankful, very grateful that I had some say in the cover.
I have to say that the my publisher right now is really making me happy, because they're taking all kinds of, you know, they're not, you know, they're not saying this is it, you know, they're just saying, what do you think? How about this? We want you to love it. And I just can't get over how nice that is. Like,
that's good. This is Lake Union, right?
Yeah, Lake Union. Yeah. And I'm not sure, like, I think we've decided on a cover, but I don't think I can share it yet. So,
okay.
But the title of the book is, I Thought You Said This Would Work.
Your titles are, that's the other thing. So do you come up with your titles? Like, does it just happen to you, or do you have to like sit and think?
Mm-mm. They just come to me. And sometimes
your titles are so Ann Garvin though. That's
the first two were not, like, they changed the first two titles, but they are very Ann Garvin. Yeah, they are very Ann Garvin, my titles. And usually, sometimes I will be texting my friend, and then I'll be like, oh, that's a title. And then I'll write them down. Because I have a whole book of titles specifically that, and sometimes I rotate them out and change them around. So I love titles, and I have so many titles for a book that I end up having so many titles because I title my chapters. Because that's
so good. I mean, that's a skill too. Like, you know, finding that good book name that you know is sticky and it's just going to work, and it sells exactly what the book is, and it gives you the vibe and everything just from the title.
Yeah,
that's a really good skill to have.
It is, but I will say that you know, I Like You Just Fine when you're not around, people really butcher that. They're like, I like your dog, I think you're nice, but I wish you weren't here. Like, people cannot get it right. I like your spine, but I'm not sure. Like, they are so funny. And then usually the booksellers are like, oh yeah, we know which one, you know. But it is a very funny thing because there's too many words in it, I think.
But, well, mine, I think a few times people have been like, there's something about Nora. And it's like, well, because you know that movie, There's Something About Mary. I guess it's kind of close. Have you met Nora? There's something about Nora.
Well, you know what? We're at 7:00 already. We've talked for a full hour.
We talked for a full hour. No echoes.
No echoes.
No feedback.
I got to say stuff, which was nice.
We got some questions.
And we surprised everybody because we didn't really promote this too much.
No.
But like, it was so great to see you again, twice in a week.
Same here. So it's always lovely.
Yeah, and tomorrow I'm talking to Karen Carbo, but instead of doing an evening talk, we're doing coffee because she's in France.
Yes.
So she's gonna have wine and I'm gonna have coffee, and we're meeting tomorrow. Mm-hmm.
Nice.
And then let's see, I think I might be done with my Zooms, but it's been so fun this week doing that.
What a smart idea too, I think, to sort of, you know, introduce a little bit these to folks using your platform. It's really nice. I think I haven't hosted Bloom. Maybe I think I've hosted it once, like way back when I first started.
Yeah.
But I think I'm gonna sign up.
Yeah, you should. And it is really fun. And I don't have to talk about myself the whole time. I don't mind telling short stories, but like, I cannot talk about myself all week, which is, you know, why we have the Poppy. So I don't have to market myself all the time, and I can market other people. But I might do a house tour, you know, like a quick.
That would be good. Yes.
Yeah, but like maybe this week sometime. But my kid has COVID, so we've got the upstairs part of the house is absolutely not presentable. But you know, maybe if we clean up some of the tissues and the crap that's up there, maybe we'll do that. But I'm kind of thinking about doing that might be fun. But anyway, we should say goodbye. So good to see you, and I'll see you soon, I hope.
All right. Thanks so much. Have a good night.
Bye-bye. Bye, everybody. Thank you so much for coming.